Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're doing a deep dive into AIPAC,
AIPAC.
the American Israel Public Affairs Committee.
Yeah.
And, you guys sent in some really fascinating sources for this one.
Yes.
A 1993 paper that really kind of examines AIPAC's agenda and techniques. And then this really interesting recent article by The Intercept that looks at their campaign spending. So basically, what we're going to try to do today is understand how AIPAC rose to become such a powerful force in American politics.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at both their traditional lobbying methods, but also this new kind of focus on electoral spending.
Yeah, it's like looking under the hood, seeing how things have evolved.
Totally. And I think for me, it's really interesting to go all the way back to post-World War II America.
Okay.
Right. So you have this moment where obviously supporting Israel is both morally and strategically paramount,
Of course.
for the United States. But what's interesting is that the State Department initially wasn't really gung-ho about giving direct aid to Israel.
Interesting.
And that actually is what kind of forced Israel to turn to Congress for support and kind of set the stage for AIPAC's emergence.
It's amazing how these things happen, right?
I know. It's like these unintended consequences.
Totally unintended consequences, yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of kind of the beginnings of AIPAC, did you know that it actually started as the American Zionist Council?
It did. The
AZC.
The AZC, yeah, back in 1951.
Back in 51.
Yeah. And that's actually a significant shift
Okay.
from the AZC to AIPAC. Becoming a non-tax exempt organization was actually a very conscious choice on their part, because other Jewish organizations who are bound by tax-exempt, restrictions couldn't operate in that way.
So it was about being able to lobby.
Exactly. Directly.
Interesting.
It was about, really being able to focus on pushing for Israel's interests.
That's fascinating, because you would think that a group like AIPAC would want the tax benefits, right?
Right. Well, and
But they really prioritized his ability to lobby.
Absolutely their core mission.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of which, their headquarters in Washington, D.C. is this heavily guarded, nondescript building.
It's so interesting.
It really is.
How they kind of have this very,
behind the scenes
approach.
Feel, right?
Totally.
Even though they wield all this influence.
Yeah. And inside those walls, you have 4 key departments that really drive their strategy.
Okay.
The executive.
Okay.
The legislative, the research, and the political development.
So you could just imagine all the people working in that building.
Absolutely.
Right.
You've got former military officials analyzing strategic matters.
Like a former Air Force colonel who understands
Exactly. You've got weapons experts keeping tabs on the latest technology.
Keeping tabs on everything.
And policy wonks just dissecting.
Every single detail of Middle Eastern affairs.
It's like a finely tuned machine.
It is.
Where every single person is
each department
has their role.
Plays a vital role in shaping AIPAC's approach.
Totally. And so when we talk about AIPAC's goals and how they achieve their goals, their traditional lobbying tactics really rely on 2 pillars.
Okay.
This idea of networking and constituent strength.
Yeah. Think back to those early days.
Yeah.
They were masters at leveraging relationships.
Okay.
They built these connections with Jewish organizations, business leaders, even figures in Hollywood.
Wow.
Using those connections to gain access to influential senators.
So they were playing the long game.
They were.
They understood that you can't just show up one day and expect to have influence.
Exactly. It takes time.
You got to build those relationships.
It takes time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they also understood that it wasn't just about influencing those in power.
Right.
It was about building a broad base of support.
Yeah.
And that's where their coalition building efforts come in.
Okay.
So they brought together these very diverse groups.
Okay.
Unions, black leaders, even fundamentalist Christians.
It's so interesting.
All united.
How they were able to bridge all those ideological divides to bring these people together.
Yeah. Well, one crucial element was their emphasis on providing accurate and balanced information to Congress.
Oh, so they were seen as a reliable source of expertise, and it earned them respect, even from those who might not have agreed with them on everything.
I see.
Even Senator Bill Bradley at the time commended them for that.
So they weren't just pushing an agenda, they were actually seen as a resource.
As a valuable resource for lawmakers.
Interesting. Okay, so they were smart.
They were.
They were playing it smart.
They were.
And then you combine that with their impressive grassroots network.
Right.
And you start to understand how they became so influential.
Okay, so let's talk about constituent strength.
Yeah, remember, Jews make up only about 3% of the U.S. population.
Right.
But they have a remarkably high voter turnout rate.
Yeah, that's a really potent combination.
It is a potent
We
combination.
have a dedicated base. They
Yeah.
all vote.
And they vote.
Yeah.
And AIPAC has been incredibly effective at mobilizing that base.
Okay.
You know, they can generate these waves of contact to representatives through letter writing campaigns, targeted emails, phone banking.
Wow.
You know, they also understand the power of influencing public opinion.
Okay.
So they work with sympathetic media outlets to get their message across.
So it's like they're hitting it from all sides.
All sides.
Right. They're going to the policymakers. They're going to the public. Were there any, like, techniques that they used that were particularly memorable?
Absolutely. The 1993 paper actually shares this story about a Federation member with personal connections to politicians.
Right.
This individual could pick up the phone and his call would be taken.
Wow.
It really highlights the impact of their grassroots network,
Right.
translating national goals into action at the local level.
Yeah.
But as we move into the 21st century, we see a significant shift in their approach.
That's where that 2024 Intercept article comes in, right? And it talks about this major change, especially during the 2022 midterms, where AIPAC starts directly funding campaigns, which is something they hadn't done before.
Right.
So what was the thinking behind that?
Well, it seems to stem from a desire to solidify their support within both parties.
Okay.
Even if it means targeting incumbents who have been critical of Israel.
Interesting. And then that brings us to their campaign spending in 2024.
Right.
$100 million.
$100 million.
Which is just, it's kind of like a hard number to even wrap your head around.
It's a staggering sum.
What that actually means.
Yeah. It's about 1/6 of what outside groups spent on the entire 2020 presidential election.
Wow.
So it's a game changer.
It's a huge amount of money.
It really is.
And it looks like they're not just, spending it on one party or the other.
Oh, it's a bipartisan strategy.
Oh, okay.
They're backing Republicans, Democrats, even independents.
So strategically choosing races.
Exactly. Choosing races where they believe they can have the biggest impact.
And the article talks about their efforts to unseat Representatives Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman.
Yes.
Who are both part of the Progressive Squad. What makes these races so significant for AIPAC?
Well, both Bush and Bowman have been vocal critics of Israeli policies.
Right.
And their victories in previous elections kind of signaled a potential shift in the Democratic Party's stance on Israel.
I see.
So AIPAC's involvement in these races was a very clear message that they're willing to challenge incumbents.
Even within their own party?
Even within their own party.
Wow.
To maintain a strong pro-Israel stance in Congress.
So these weren't just any races.
No, they were high-profile battles.
They were like...
that could shape the future of the Democratic Party's approach to Israel.
Really important for AIPAC to get involved in.
Absolutely.
And the fact that they were among the most expensive House primaries ever really highlights AIPAC's growing financial power.
Their deep pockets and
their determination to use
their
it.
willingness to use it.
To shape the political landscape.
To get the outcomes they want.
Right. It makes you wonder, though, what does this mean for the future of political discourse on Israel?
Right.
If a group like AIPAC can pour such vast sums of money into campaigns?
Will dissenting voices be drowned out?
Yeah. Are we going to lose
the nuance?
Going to stifle debate?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a valid concern.
And it's not just about AIPAC, right?
No, this trend.
This is like a broader, raises concerns about the influence of money in politics as a whole.
Exactly.
You know, are we moving towards a system where the wealthiest voices
have an outsized impact,
have a disproportionate impact on the issues that get attention?
Yeah.
And the policies that get enacted.
And for our listeners who might not be super familiar with how campaign finance works in the U.S., can you kind of explain how this kind of spending actually works?
Sure. Campaign finance laws in the United States are incredibly complex.
Yeah.
There are limits on how much individuals and organizations can directly contribute to candidates.
Right.
But there are also these loopholes that allow for unlimited spending through political action committees
Right.
or PACs.
Right, PACs and super PACs.
And super PACs, exactly.
So AIPAC isn't giving money directly to candidates.
Right.
They're giving it to these
They're funneling it through
AIPACs and super PACs.
these other organizations.
Right.
They can then spend it on things like advertising
Got it.
and voter outreach.
So they're like a megaphone.
Exactly. They're the megaphone.
They're amplifying the voices
amplifying the voices.
of candidates who align with their interests.
Precisely.
Interesting.
And while AIPAC isn't the only organization engaging in this kind of spending,
Right.
there's significant investment in the 2022 midterms. And they're pledged $100 million for 2024.
Yeah.
Really demonstrate a level of financial muscle
Yeah, nobody else has that kind of money.
that few other lobbying groups can match.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's clear that this move to directly spending on campaigns has really increased
It has amplified
their
them.
influence dramatically, yeah.
But does it have any downsides, do you think?
Certainly one potential downside is that this kind of aggressive spending can create a chilling effect
Okay.
on open debate and dissenting voices.
So even if AIPAC says they want to provide
Right.
accurate and balanced information,
If lawmakers fear that criticizing Israel or supporting Palestinian rights could lead to a well-funded campaign against them.
right, they might be less likely to speak out
I see.
on these issues.
So it could actually backfire
It could backfire.
on them in a way.
Yeah, in terms of creating a more nuanced and robust
Right.
public conversation.
They might end up actually having less nuance
Exactly.
because people are afraid to speak out.
It's a paradox.
Yeah.
You know, they might be aiming for a more pro-Israel Congress,
Yeah.
but their tactics could lead to less nuanced discussions
Right.
and a narrowing of perspectives on a complex and sensitive issue.
And that brings us back to the question of
Exactly.
what does this mean for you,
For the listeners.
our listeners?
Yes.
How do you think this shift in AIPAC's approach will impact the way we talk about
Yeah.
Israel and Palestine in America?
Hmm.
Will it lead to a more balanced understanding?
Right.
Or could it further polarize the debate?
It's a great question.
We've seen how AIPAC has evolved
From humble beginnings.
from those early days
Yeah, building relationships.
of building relationships and grassroots organizing to
To this
big money campaign spending.
era of big money.
And it raises these really important questions
Absolutely.
about how our democracy works.
Yeah, whose voices are amplified?
Whose voices get heard.
Whose voices get silenced?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crucial to understand the forces at play
Yeah.
that shape our political landscape.
We can't be passive
AIPAC is just one example
consumers of information, right?
of a well-organized, well-funded group that is actively trying to influence
You need to think about
policy outcomes.
this stuff.
Whether you agree with their positions or not, their tactics and their impact on American politics are undeniable.
Totally. And this is just one example
Exactly.
of a group that's doing this.
Right. There are countless others.
So apply what you've learned today
Yes. Take this.
to other areas of your life.
Take these insights and apply them to other issues you care about.
Think about these levers of power,
Look for those patterns of influence.
the things that are happening in your community,
The levers of power
in your state.
that shape the decisions being made in your community, your state, and on the national stage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap.
Okay.
We started by exploring AIPAC's roots.
Yeah, their evolution from the American Zionist Council to the powerhouse lobbying group they are today.
Then we looked at their traditional
Right.
lobbying
And
techniques.
you examine their traditional lobbying techniques, focusing on networking, coalition building,
Right.
and their impressive grassroots network.
And we talked about how they really tried to focus on
We also highlighted their commitment to providing accurate and balanced information,
providing accurate information.
which earned them a degree of credibility even among those who might disagree with their overall aims.
Right. And then we shifted gears and looked at this new approach
Exactly.
of directly spending money on campaigns.
A strategy that has significantly amplified their influence, but also raised concerns about the potential silencing of dissenting voices.
Yeah, and it's a really complex issue
It is a complex issue.
with really far-reaching implications.
Far-reaching implications. AIPAC's story is a reminder that political influence is a multifaceted,
Yeah,
ever-evolving game.
totally.
And as we move forward, it's up to each of us to stay informed,
Stay informed.
engage in thoughtful dialogue,
Yeah.
and advocate for the policies and the world we believe in.
Well, thank you for joining us
Thank you.
on this deep dive into the world of AIPAC.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you surfaced with new insights,
Well, Christian,
new questions, and a renewed commitment
a renewed commitment.
to understanding the forces that shape our world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, it's interesting because this deep dive into AIPAC
Yeah.
has really made me think about the role of other special interest groups
Oh,
in
absolutely.
American politics.
I mean, they're everywhere.
and it makes you wonder, right? Like,
Yeah.
how much influence do they have?
Right. Are they operating in the shadows?
Are they operating in the shadows?
Are they being transparent?
Are we even aware
Yeah.
of how they're shaping the decisions? Mm-hmm.
That impact our lives.
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
Yeah. So I think a big takeaway from me
Yeah.
is that we really need to be more aware
More vigilant
of these groups
and their agendas.
and how they're trying to influence our government.
And how they're using their resources.
Because knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely, knowledge is power.
If we understand how these groups operate,
we can start to hold them accountable,
then we can start to
demand transparency,
demand transparency.
and make sure that our democracy
Right.
is truly representative of the people.
Of the people and not just the special interests.
Not just the special interests.
Well said. I think that's a perfect place to end
I agree.
this deep dive.
Yeah.
So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a really fascinating conversation,
It has.
and we hope you learned something new
And that you'll continue to explore these issues.
and that you'll keep asking those tough questions
Absolutely. About how power works.
because that's how we create a more just and equitable world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks.
Thanks again for listening.